welcome to Socialsuite's latest webinar on why responsible business matters and how this starts with materiality. My name is Tom Latimer and I'll be your host today as we delve into this important topic. Firstly, for those that you're not familiar with Socialsuite, we're an Australian-founded software and services company providing affordable solutions to help a range of both private and listed ASX companies and helping them progress on their sustainability journey. To help us go through this topic, we're joined by our Chief Impact Officer, Dr. Tim Siegenbeek van Heukelom. Just before I hand across to Tim, a bit of housekeeping. So you notice there's a chat box on the right-hand side. We will be leaving time at the end for any questions and answers, so feel free to pop anything in the chat as we're going along. We'll address that at the end. There'll also be a couple of polls, which I'll just pop one up now as well. It just helps steer the conversation a little bit. So first of all, just keen to see where you're at on your sustainability journey, whether you are early stages and in that education phase. Are you keen on wanting to start and progress that journey? You might already be reporting and obviously continuously improving what you're doing, or you might be out there and be the industry leader already. So there's a few responses coming in, but it seems like a lot are already reporting and improving, and there's a few that are in the early stages. So without further ado, I'd like to hand across to Tim.
Thanks, Tom, and welcome everyone to this webinar. So today we're going to look at responsible business. That's a pretty broad and wide topic, but what we want to do is link that back to sustainability and really look at what is that link between sustainability, a pretty generic term, could mean a lot of things to a lot of people in a different context, and why responsible business is important. So that's what we'll start with today, a little bit about sustainability and responsible business to create a context. Then we'll actually kind of out of that review of that space, we'll come to materiality and how you can use materiality to drive responsible business, to help you do sustainability well. And then finally, we'll look at some actions. What can you actually do to make your business more responsible? So 3 areas that we'll go through. As Tom said, if you have any questions, you make sure to put them in the chat. I might pick them up along the way, or we might get to it at the end. So first of all, then sustainability, and then linking that to responsible business and linking, why is that link so important there? So it's really useful sometimes to just go back to first principles and ask, why are we doing sustainability? What is it really and why are we doing it? Now, and I think that what is it is the hard part. It really depends on who you are, where do you sit in a business or outside of a business, what is your perspective, what is your context that you're working in? And I think if you ask 100 people about what they think about when you ask them about sustainability, you probably get 100 different answers and probably wildly different answers. So it could be a lot of things. So take it back to first principles and think about, why are we doing all this work? Really what we're trying to do mostly is, with the outcome in mind, is try to run a responsible business in a way that the business is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So that's kind of a sustainable development definitions from the Brundtland report in the 80s, but I think it's still pretty apt. But even easier to think about it is really responsible business is about that triple bottom line. You might have heard that about that as well. So it's really doing business that benefits people, planet, and profit. So we're really looking at those 3 areas there. We're doing well, people, society, we're having not too many negative impacts on them and mitigating where we can, enhancing any benefits for people, the same for planet. And of course, there's always that bottom line there as well. There is the profit as well, which is really important. So today, let's take that as the starting point, really the end. Like if we can achieve that, that's what we're all aiming for. Now, how does sustainability play into that then? So how do we drive responsible business? And the way I want to frame sustainability is thinking about it as the actions. So what are the practices within your business? And what are the ways in which you do due diligence that can actually drive better, responsible, and sustainable business? So see sustainability as a practice, as something that's integrated and embedded within your business, rather than as, a pretty loose concept. And once you actually are working throughout your business on, what are our business functions and operations and practices, and if we can look at that from a sustainable or responsible lens and how we can do that better, then you can also start to measure things. And that is then where ESG metrics come in. Environmental, social governance, concept that really, what it really means is standardized and comparable metrics to disclose performance on sustainability matters that are material to your business. And that material to the business is really important here. Now, why is that? Sustainability, like I said, can mean a lot of things. If you think about topics, you can come up with a lot of topics that are related to environment or to social or to governance. There are hundreds of different topics there. But should you be taking action on all of them? Should you be measuring all of them? No, you shouldn't. You should really only focus on the things that matter most to your business, that are material to your business. So this is a context here. We're doing this sustainability work to, do better business. We use ESG metrics to measure and to, report on our sustainability performance. And ultimately, we do those things to drive better business, to really focus on that triple bottom line. That means doing better for people, planet, and profit. Now, what we do see often, in particular today, is that there's a lot of focus when we talk about sustainability or sustainability reporting, when people think about ESG metrics. They think about disclosure, compliance, reporting. And what we see is companies get a bit stuck into what we can refer to as a disclosure purgatory, where they really are like focused. They're in the tunnel. They're focused on the disclosures. They're worried about requirements from all kind of stakeholders, whether they be regulators or incoming regulation or investors or questionnaires. It's all about answering the disclosures and the requirements. And what happens then? You really lose track of why you're doing this. You lose track of we're measuring things in terms of the sustainability areas that matter most to our business to drive that value creation. So really, a really apt way of putting it that one of my colleagues, Nawal Al-Sadi, said recently is to drive more sustainability, we actually need to stop talking about sustainability. So really, I think what he means here is that, we need to look at that bigger picture and keep in mind why we're doing this. It doesn't mean that reporting and disclosure is not important, but everything has its place and we need to understand why we're doing it. So what that really means is, how do we get out of that disclosure purgatory? It is about focusing on what is important, keeping that end in mind, why we're doing it, and finding out what is actually material. So bring that whole set of disclosures down to the things that really matter to your particular business context. Now, that can be hard, especially if you see something like this here. So this is, I think, from a few years back, but still a good representation of all these voluntary ESG and sustainability standards and frameworks that are out there. Now, a lot of them are probably still out there, but we have seen at a high level, there has been some harmonization and consolidation. And probably if you ask most sustainability practitioners, the key voluntary reporting standards at the moment are on an impact side, the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, and more from a sustainability related financial disclosure perspective. So those disclosures that focus on financial kind of sustainability related metrics are coming from the ISSB, which is an integration of TCFD, SASB, integrated reporting, and some other frameworks that are brought together under the ISSB with their standards IFRS S1 and S2. So the two good voluntary frameworks that can give you two angles on reporting there. But still, there's a lot out there. So a lot of people still can get lost in reporting. Now, that is progressing and getting a bit better. There's a bit more clarity there, but then we're hit with this wave of mandatory disclosures. So this is also something we see, and this is also really at a glance. We're only like really, skimming the surface here around what is happening globally. So you see this across the world, all kind of regulation coming in. Here in Australia, we have the ASRS, which are effectively a specific for our jurisdiction, specific set coming out of that ISSB that we just looked at, focused on climate. We see there's a lot of other jurisdictions really working on this, with Europe as the front runner there, with their CSRD, their Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, really the main one. And under there, they have the European Sustainability Reporting Standard that is really now one of the key pieces of legislation that companies have to follow, but there's a lot more that is already there and on the way. So there's no surprise there really when companies get a bit overwhelmed on what to do. So again, let's take that step back, talking about responsible business and how do we actually get to that point? How do we kind of do better? And how do we do better business? And how do we improve the triple bottom line? So keep that in focus at the high level. So we need to ask that question then, where should we focus our sustainability efforts? So we could be doing all kinds of things from a voluntary reporting perspective. There are things we probably have to do from a mandatory disclosure perspective, but even there, it often applies that materiality lens. You only report certain things if it is material to your business. So you have to start there in that center and just see that circle as your business and work out what really matters to your business. And if you work that out, automatically linked to that, you can find the relevant ESG metrics and data points that you can measure and report. So the thing you really need to do is identify those sustainability areas where you have the largest risks and opportunities and where you have the biggest impacts. So really the question is, what is material and what is not? That really helps you to understand what you should be doing from a sustainability, efforts and practices perspective, link that to your disclosures, and that together helps you drive that triple bottom line, doing things better for people, planet, and profit. So a little bit of context there. Now let's look then at materiality. How can we use materiality then to, understand this space a bit better and then ultimately drive responsible business? Now, some people might be working on other things as well. So I think Tom will also put in another poll here about what is your main concern right now? What are you looking at? Is materiality your focus or some other components potentially as well? So materiality in a sustainability context is really, two things. Ultimately, materiality is really the importance of an item of information to a decision maker. But in a sustainability context, we see there are two sides of it. There is the financial materiality, and that's really about the company's financial performance. So it's about sustainability related financial disclosures that are focused on the sustainability related risks and opportunities that are affecting or potentially affecting your financial position, your enterprise value. So what are sustainability related risks and opportunities that impact your business? That's one side. The other side then is looking at what is the business's impact on the environment and society. So impact materiality, really looking at what your organization is doing, your operations, from a positive and negative impacts in the short, medium, and long term. So it's two sides of the coin there. So you could be looking at one, or you could be looking at the other, or you could be looking at both. And that is these days really kind of the main thing that people look at, double materiality. It is really looking at, assessing both perspectives. How are we as a business impacting the world? What are our impacts across our entire value chain? And then there's on the financial materiality side. So how are some of those risks and opportunities related potentially to some of those impacts or standalone having an impact on our business? So if legislation is coming in around, a new carbon trading scheme, that might pose some risk to our business. If, there's a set price for buying offsets or for, carbon emissions, there's a risk there. But with that, potentially, there is an impact you're having on the world. There might be an opportunity there. So it's really about integrating those two sides. Now, if we bring back those voluntary standards that we looked at earlier, each is looking at one side of that coin there. Whereas the ISSB, often, for disclosures, partly using SASB still, they really look at that financial materiality, identifying the related topics and risks and opportunities in which, the world is impacting your business. Whereas GRI is really looking at helping you identify the most significant impacts that you have on the economy, environment, and people. So it's good to keep them both in mind there. And some companies, do a materiality assessment from that financial materiality point of view. Others follow more GRI, and others trying to integrate that somehow and do that together. Now, the problem with that is probably right now that not everyone is really satisfied with how they do their materiality assessment. So this is from a report that came out last week. I think that what we see here is that managers, are definitely not that happy with how things go. So I think they're closer to doing that materiality assessment. They're involved in it, whereas executives have to take a step back and look at the outcome and like, well, that's a decent list of topics. But the process and the rigor and the way that's been done, is definitely a bit lacking. Now, fortunately, there's a new player on the block there. The European legislator has come out, like I said, with their CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and they really mandate now that every year you do reporting, you have to do a double materiality assessment. And they actually have come up with a pretty prescriptive way of how you should be doing that as well. So quite quickly, that is now becoming a best practice approach to doing double materiality, integrating both that impact and financial materiality perspective. And what I thought would be useful is to unpack that a little bit more detail, is looking at, if you are looking at double materiality, how would that work then? And how do you need to conceptualize that? So I'm not going to dig entirely into how ESRS or CSRD does it, but give you a flavor of what that looks like. So this is a really abstract generalization of a business. There's that large green box here, which is the company. It has smaller green boxes in there, which are your business activities. So all the different, departments and functions your business has. Then are your upstream relationships, your supply chain. There's your downstream relationships, your off-takers, your consumers, product end of life, and all that together makes up your entire value chain. Now, like I said earlier, is we need to work out within your business, but also, of course, the relationships you have across that value chain. What are some of those sustainability actions, the practices, the ways you do business that you can make changes? Where can you be greener or cleaner or more responsible? Where can you find efficiencies? And in particular, in the areas that matter most to your business. And once you figure that out, once you know what those things are, you can also start measuring those areas and come up with, we've done this better and we've done that better and we've improved here. Now, how do you work that out then? And again, let's look at those risks and opportunities we spoke about and those positive and negative impacts. They are really crucial here. That is actually where we should be starting here. We should be starting with looking at that entire value chain and working out what are our impacts, what are our risks, and what are our opportunities across the value chain in relation to particular sustainability area. So we can look at environment, at climate, at mitigation, or at emissions, and see, is there a particular impact that we have, positive or negative, associated risk or opportunity, and really work our way through that and come up with a long list of what I like to call I's and R's and O's, impacts, risks, and opportunities. That is really that starting point. And once you start working your way through that and engage with your stakeholders, you really get a better idea of what those I, R's, and O's are, what the related topics are. And that is really what most stakeholders really want to know. What are those most important material risks and opportunities that your company faces? And the same on the other side, what are those most important positive and negative impacts that you're having on the world? That is what materiality really is about. And that is what you're trying to work out here. The material I's and R's and O's that you're having, they of course are related to particular topics. And once you have those areas and those I's and R's and O's worked out, you know where you can take action. And you might come up initially with a long list of 100 or so, and you work that down to engagement and analysis to a subset of really material I's and R's and O's related to particular topics. And that is where you take those actions. And that is where you have related disclosures and ESG metrics in how you measure and report them. And in doing all that, you're improving your business. You're doing better within your own business activities, in your relationships, up your supply chain. And sometimes it's really hard to take this abstract view and trying to flip that into more of a practical view. So for instance, think about it this way on the upstream. So you might be having operations that you source raw materials for your core production, your manufacturing. And you might be sourcing a particular resource, coltan, from Africa, from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, through your due diligence, through this process of identifying positive and negative impacts and risks and opportunities, you find that actually where you're sourcing that coltan from, generally the mining there is done through child labor, forced labor, pretty poor working and living conditions, and the process itself is terrible in the environment. So there are all these risks now and impacts that you're having directly through your upstream relationships in your supply chain there. So that's something now that's, on your list there. And that is something, if you find you only source 5% there, it's pretty minimal. Maybe you can change suppliers, but you might also be sourcing 80 or 90% from that supplier. So can you use your business relationship to put pressure on them to change their practices? So there are all these sustainability actions that you can now consider and look at. Are they important enough? Are they material? What can we do? How can we improve? But also on the downstream, so that whole value chain, where are your products going? What is the end of life? Are your products generally ending up somewhere in a landfill, or do people throw them out in nature? Or what are the final materials in your product? How are they being used? And think about what is the impact you're having with that. So there's a lot of questions here to ask. Now, that is what the world's working their way through now. So there is some global best practice coming out now from that double materiality approach that I just described here. We see the first one coming out in Europe. Companies there are now, having to comply with this particular approach to materiality. And we see some companies like Ørsted here coming out with their first report in which they're starting to work. You might think about materiality with the classic matrix where, you have two axes with a few topics mapped and, that's the end of it. We need to go a lot deeper now. We need to map per topic, what are those positive and negative impacts and risks? And are they in our own operations or in our value chain, and describe them? What is that material impact or risk? And what are we doing about it? So this is a good first kind of, overview of what companies are doing. Similarly here, everyone is taking their own approach there. Scan global logistics per topic, identifying actual negative impacts or positive impacts, where they sit in the value chain, what the time horizon is. And these are all type of requirements that we need to start looking at. So we need to go deeper. But in doing that, we have a much better grasp of what we actually should be improving in our own operations and in our value chain, and how we ultimately can do better business, can run a responsible business, and improve that triple bottom line. So what can you then do to make your business more responsible? How can you really take this and internalize that? First of all, I think that where we started today, so to close the circle there, is keep that end in focus. What can you do to improve your business triple bottom line from a sustainability perspective? How can you become more responsible, so to say? Now, in doing that, think about sustainability as really having cross-functional ownership in the business. It is not about having that one token officer on a desk somewhere who's tasked with all of this and no one else really cares about it. It really is about integrating and embedding sustainability as a practice for everyone in your business. Everyone should be thinking about, are there particular ways we can do this more efficient, greener, cleaner, more responsible, and looking outside of the box in terms of your own business. That whole value chain is extremely important there. The other one then is, don't just tick the box with ESG reporting. So what we looked at, get yourself out of that disclosure purgatory there. So it is important reporting, definitely. And investors and stakeholders want comparable, decision useful, investor grade data. So it's not something to drop, but it's a component of a larger process there. And you first need to work out what is actually material from a sustainability point of view before you can do meaningful reporting. So work out what's important and where you can do better. So, get into that exercise there. And that exercise, that materiality assessment there, we'll look at that in a minute, but the main thing I would say there is avoid a captain's call. So a materiality assessment should really be based on data, on engagement, on analysis. Now, you might not immediately want to jump at that, deep exercise there that Europeans require. It is becoming best practice and the gold standard for doing it, but take your time to work towards that. But look at best practice and think about what is the right solution for you to improve your current process. every materiality assessment, see what you can improve over the previous one. How can you do better? How can you, move towards making it a better type of approach that really draws out the key sustainability areas in your business that matter. So finding that right solution, is a bit of a journey there. And what I've done here is just to, in a generalized way, line out a little bit of that spectrum there, how you can look at it. On the left-hand side here, we look at the simplest way of doing a materiality assessment, and probably also the poorest way. And that is, like I said, that's the captain's call. So really what that means is having a discretionary decision by generally one person or maybe two over a coffee. We'll pick a few sustainability topics, their material, and that's the end of it. So captain's call, you have a few topics, but it's not really a materiality assessment. Then if we still keep it internal in the business, we often see that internal consensus. There's at least some working group or some committee that, has some discussion. It's still, pretty uninformed, picks a few topics there. Often this is, like I said, internally focused. It's from a single perspective. So it might be, just that risk and opportunity perspective, financial materiality. Sometimes it is more impact focused. Then we move into stakeholder engagement. So we are going a bit more external there. Often, not always, it's just a single-sided materiality assessment. So the company might say, we are working on the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, and they tell us that we need to talk to all our stakeholders and get their views on our impact. So what companies love to do is do, the part of least resistance there. So they say, let's do a survey. So it's very heavy on surveys and interviews. Go out to your stakeholders, do a survey, ask them where you have an impact, and that's the end of it. Sometimes that is a bit more double materiality as well, where they ask about both sides, but generally it's more surveys on impacts. Now, if we then move even more to the right, we're moving from simple a bit to that deeper, more complex approach there. That's where you get into that double materiality approach there. We're now starting to look at both the internal and external component. We might be looking across that entire value chain. And the first step there is often still starting with a topic-based approach there. We're not so much looking at the impacts, risks, and opportunities, but we are looking at topics from a double materiality perspective across our value chain. The next step is then to including that whole exercise around your impacts, risks, and opportunities to really inform, really at a more granular level, the topics that matter and the areas that matter to your business. And then there's the final full set of compliance from the ESRS. And what we see then is that best practice is moving towards that, that right-hand side here, that is, quite quickly becoming the gold standard there. The question then is, where do you sit on this spectrum and how can you move from the left to the right? And no one is asking you to jump into full ESRS compliance overnight, unless you, of course, have to mandatory report against the ESRS, but even companies that have to do that still struggle. It's still emerging practice there, and there's still a lot of room for improvement there. What we do see in the market, though, is that in a recent survey as well, that 81 of all practitioners who aren't required to do CSRD, which is that ESRS European standard, they still plan to align all or part of their reporting strategies with that mandate. So that is a clear sign that a lot of companies are moving now to the right-hand side there and saying, if that is best practice and there is definition around how this should be done, let's do it. Let's go that way. So to round it all up there is really about what's the end point that you have in mind, responsible business. How can you work out from a sustainability point of view what you need to do? And related to that, what are the ESG metrics that you need to report on? Materiality assessment is really a good starting point and cornerstone to do this work there. So what we find is a lot of people want to, discuss that in a bit more detail, why they are on the journey and how it could help them, have stronger reporting, have clearer view within their business on sustainability, and really help communicate as well to the business and to the board and management at large that it's not just a vacuum in which sustainability operates. It is part and parcel of doing better business. So talk to us if you want to, look at your particular situation and see how that might apply to you. What I'm going to do is from here hand over to Tom, because we're pretty much at time, but there might be some questions that have come in, and we can jump into the Q&A.
Thanks, Tim. So if anyone's got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat now. There was one from Lauren a little bit earlier, just asking if you can explain the financial side again. I assume she means from a financial materiality perspective.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said, there's two sides to materiality. The financial materiality, what it really means is we're going to look at sustainability-related risks and opportunities that your business faces. Now, often these risks and opportunities are related to some impact your business is having. So potentially you're having an impact on the world through, a lot of GHG emissions, for instance. With that, there are associated risks. So there could be risks that, like I said, if there's a carbon market coming into place in your jurisdiction, that could mean there is a direct financial impact. If carbon is going to be priced for every ton, there's suddenly now a set price in the market. That is a significant risk to your business if you are a large carbon emitter. So you need to take that into account then. That is a sustainability-related risk to the business. Equally, out of that impact, it could be an opportunity that if you change your business and you bring your carbon footprint down, you're reducing that risk there. And there might be other ways of generally really removing some of those carbon emissions and thinking about opportunities in which you could think about renewable energy or other processes that you put in place there. So it's looking about risk and opportunities that are coming from a sustainability related area that potentially have a financial effect on your business.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. There's no other questions. We might just wrap up there. We will send across the recording as well shortly via email. As Tim mentioned, if you are wanting to know any more about services that we can offer or how we can help progress your journey, then feel free to reach out. Alternatively, I'll pop in the calendar link in the chat box and feel free to book a time. But yeah, thanks for joining. And as I said, we'll follow with the recording soon. Take care.